whenever I see your films, I feel like, is there a script at all? Or do you just,
Yes.
you know?
I write full scripts with dialogue and everything, and I labor over them intensely, believe it or not.
Because it
But
doesn't look like it, and it's amazing.
that's a great compliment. I generally just keep writing and keep writing, and then when we're there on set, I force my actors to come off the page, and I remind them of their, intention and goal and motivation for each scene. And, at the end of the day, I try to just walk into a scene and say, look, this is what you're trying to accomplish in this scene. I really don't care how you do it. You know who you are. Um, you know, uh, let's just see what happens. And, the reason that I employ that technique, and, they end up using quite a bit of the script, usually, if the script is good. And if the script is off or not quite right, they usually find ways, or I find ways to help them do it better. And so that kind of cuts through all the bullshit and gets human behavior down to as realistic as it can be. But I think the other thing that it does that I only learned in retrospect. I mean, I started doing this because I would get my scenes up on their feet, and I didn't like what I had written, or, people are waiting for other people to say lines, right? And so I would push them and constantly push them into a realm where they're just trying to do life, and they know the parameters of the scene. And so the idea is, and I didn't realize this until after the fact, but what I was looking for is this feeling that anything could happen right here. Anything is possible. And what I've learned is that it can only exist if it's true. If anything is possible, the actors really start listening. They forget, okay, once she says this, I'm going to say this. We don't want that kind of like waiting around. And what I learned after, showing it to audiences and talking to audience members is that they felt that way too. They felt like it was not controlled, and that anything could happen in that moment. And when you have that feeling, at least for me, that's stylistically what I'm looking for. And I pretty much subjugate everything to real things happening in front of the camera, trying to create an environment where some lightning can strike and you're filming when it strikes. So yeah, that's the primary reason that I employ improvisation. It's like goal-based improvisation, and there's plenty of dialogue and actions and stuff that they've read that they can use. I mean, there's a whole other type of improv that's popular in America, at least, which is like for hard comedies, people will do their plots, and then there'll be a spot for a joke, and then they'll be like, let's improvise 10 different jokes right here, right. And I'm doing something super different from that. It is goal-based and scene-based and, dramaturgy-based, I guess.
Yeah, and I think so everything that obviously comes out looks very natural, and that's probably because you're focusing on authenticity. And so it can be said in various ways. It just doesn't have to be what's written on the paper.
Exactly.
And it's great that you encourage your actors to explore that. I also feel that you have to know the structure and the dramaturgy well to be able to break it.
That's completely correct. And or the improvisation can actually inform the dramaturgy and the structure. It can inform that you actually don't have enough going on in this scene, and this isn't a 5-minute scene. This is a 42-second scenelet, or we need this to be a scene, and we were missing something critical. And what needs to happen is that critical element happens 10 minutes from now in the next scene with these two people, and now we're going to pull it forward because this is what needs to happen right now. So I think what it really does is, I know you have all experienced this, but like, I think production is a traumatic experience. It is like one of the hardest things that we do. We have to say that we love it because we're all idiots trying to do something impossible here, right? We're all like morons who are just like, yeah, let's use all our intelligence and all our gifts to make us broke and make our parents worried about us. That's like what we're all doing, right? So I think when we get on set, it's like, it's very intense. There's 400 things going on at once. And it's really, really hard to take that step back and become that audience member in, in China, in a dark room, and wondering, why does this matter to me? But that is really the task, is like, okay, now I let go of all these people I love and are so nicely agreeing to do these weird things that I'm asking them to do, and to retreat back to that place. And I find that the improvisation, or just the reinvention of what you're doing right there and then, it helps you re-up in your mind exactly what is being accomplished here and what exactly is of value. And does this actually move me or make me laugh or scare me or whatever, as opposed to, like harboring all those years and months of intention and forcing it. Because a lot of times what happens is it creates a veil where we're not able to see actually what's happening, and everybody's thrilled. Everybody's like, wow, it's happening. And you might be back there thinking like, it's not happening the way that I want it to, and the other thing that's hard is that everyone on set, except you, wants to move on. Yeah. Everyone wants to move on, right? That you are fighting a weird war against the loveliest people on the planet. You know what I mean? Like, your favorite people are all, because they all want to make the day. And they all want to go home, and they all just want to, so sometimes the hardest thing is just to be like, this is great, but something's not quite right. And I'd like to move some pieces around and try something else. It's really, really hard to do that. And it's funny because because I failed tremendously and didn't make anything good for the first 10 years of my career, that I am so willing and ruthless about re-rigging things if need be, because nothing is more painful than making a mediocre movie. And in the end, and so now that's changed my perspective on production. People are always like, was it so fun? And my answer is like, no, it wasn't. It was exhausting and terrifying. And I questioned myself and my whole life's purpose many, many times during the production of this film. Of course, I laughed. Of course, I had, I think like the correct assessment is it was fulfilling. It was like, this is what I'm supposed to do. It was a huge learning experience. I laughed, I cried, but like, was it fun? Ride a roller coaster if you're looking for fun. You know what I mean?
I want to ask you about your personal commandments. If you're making a mid to no budget feature film that just sort of gets you on the map, helps you learn the craft, is your calling card into the industry, what would you personally suggest in your kitty bag, so to say, if you have some tools to share? Just those.
Yes. I have very strong thoughts on this because, like I was saying, I made nothing but terrible movies for 10 years. I would say that the only thing I had going for me was that I knew that they were terrible. That is very, very important. I have learned in retrospect, it's again, some of that like larger perspective, because as you guys know, a lot of student filmmakers think that because they made it, it's a masterpiece, and they can't get outside themselves to see what actually is unfolding, So I have a very simple rule, and my brother and I feel the same way about it, with trying to get that first movie that's good, the first movie that's really good and represents who you are and what you want to contribute or what you uniquely have to contribute. I think it's volume. It's making movies in volume. And here's this oversimplistic version of it. Take a year and make a movie every month over the course of one weekend. And look, make it as cheaply as humanly possible. Make it on iPhone if you have to. Worst case scenario is you have a masterpiece shot on iPhone, edited on your laptop. Not gonna be a problem, because when you make something that it has electricity in it and is you and is kind of undeniable, it paves the way. It just paves the path. I always say the answer to every question at every film festival is make an undeniably great film. That is the answer to every single question. How do you get into producing? How do you distribute? How do you make an undeniably great film? Which simplifies things a lot, but that's the hardest thing. That's the hardest thing to do, and there's no tricks. I mean, when we made our first good short film, it's a tiny movie, 7 minutes long, called This Is John, about a guy trying to perfect the personal greeting of his answering machine, failing to do so, having a full nervous breakdown. It's not an answering machine like your outgoing. This was the old days, 2003. So, like your outgoing message of your cell phone now. And it's something that had happened to me. We shot it on our family's home video camera. It literally cost the price of a tape. It cost $3. And it went to Sundance, and we got an agent, we got a lawyer, we got people talking to us about feature films. And everyone that I know that has done it and has gotten to the level where they can actually make a living doing what they want to do, it has come from, this is if you're a writer director, right? This is not crew. It has come from that constant effort of just trying to get to that place where you have that one. It used to be a DVD, now it's a link. You need a link where you can say, this is who I am, this is what I'm capable of. I'm capable of much more, but I don't need to make any excuses. You take this link. And it's the type of thing where you'll have gotten there, like Anshulika said, when other people are sharing your link and saying, you have to see this. You can't do that work. Other people will do that work. And you will know when other people are saying things like, can I send this link to this person? When are you making your next film? When you start hearing that, that's when you know you're on to it.
As a writer, what do you think is important to bring with you on set, like when you've written your own script? What's important to retain and what's important to avoid when you're directing your own script?
That's great. I think the only thing that's important to retain are the fundamentals, the building blocks, the structure, the dramaturgy of what it is you're trying to accomplish. I think it's important to jettison everything else, because everything's different when you get on set than what you imagined, and so you're like retaining all the critical things that need to move this scene forward so that we get to the next thing and whatever it may be. But the actors are different. The environment's different. And the most important thing is to be like, okay, this is now what I have. You're almost like rewriting the script now with everything that you actually have, and I've dealt with that on so many levels. Sometimes you have a scene where an actor is supposed to come in and be really enthusiastic, right? But you were shooting all night last night, and that actor is grumpy, very upset, and they're trying to act enthusiastic, and it's weird, right? The most important thing to do is to not try to force them to be not. We can't force people to not be. You have to be like, okay, this person is weirdly enthusiastic, enthusiastically weird, however you want to say it. And how can we reckon with that? Because the other person's dialogue might need to change a little. Like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? No, I'm good. I'm good. Like aggressively enthusiastic, whatever it may be. Once you get into that zone, then it's real again. And you can shimmy it however you want to get the most interesting version that you can, but it must also check the boxes of your dramaturgy, right? It must check the boxes of what it needs to move that forward. And that is that's a tightrope that you have to walk. But if you do it, then you're at the top of your game, and you're making miracles happen. Is how I feel about it. It's like it's usually a very narrow corridor that gets anything done, threading needles, and if you're not threading needles, you might not be pushing hard enough. That's kind of how I feel. I mean, these are for critical scenes, not, he gets out of his car and he walks into the building,